Okay, today we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about factoring. Factoring is something you've done a little bit of with numbers, but not so much with algebraic expressions. So what we're going to learn to do today is actually what is factoring, and we're going to learn what a greatest common monomial factor is, and then how to factor using it. So I want you to take a second, and I want you to jot down all of the factors of 24, of 40, and of 100. And when you are done, let's pause the recording, and when you're done, check your answers. Okay, did you get them all? Okay. I tend to do this in pairs. When I look at factors, I just kind of look at what goes into 24. And 1 goes into 24 times. 2 goes in 12 times. 3 goes in 8 times. 4 goes in 6. And then 5 doesn't go in, and my next number 6, well, I've already got that as a factor, so I'm done. So once I meet up, or I hit a factor that I've already hit, then I'm done. All right. So what I want to do is I want to talk about factoring a monomial completely. And when we're doing this, we're going to be talking about its prime factors. Okay. So remember, prime factors are prime numbers that have only one in itself as factors. And you probably used a factor tree when you were little to do this. So what you do is what goes into 40? Well, I know 4 goes into 40 10 times. I know 2 goes into 10 5 times. And then in 4, 2 goes into that twice. So these things at the end of my trees are my prime factors. Okay. So I'm going to get 2 times 2. I've got 3 of them, times 2 times 5. If you were to multiply all those together, 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2 is 8, times another 2 is 5, and that's going to give me 40. Okay, then I've got 2 C's and 1 D. So this is factored completely, and I can check it by multiplying all my prime factors together, and it should get what I started with. Let's look at, let's erase this here, 120 a squared raised to the 5th b squared. The first thing I want you to notice is that you've got a negative. So I'm just going to deal with that negative right out front and say it's -1. And then I'm just going to look at my factors of 120. I know 10 goes in 12 times. 12 breaks down to 3 times 4, and 4 is 2 times 2. And then 10 breaks down to 2 times 5. So I've got 3 2's, 2 times 2 times 2, times 3 times 5, and then I've actually got 5 A's, 2, and 2 B's. So this is negative 120 a to the 5th b squared factored completely. All right. Now, the greatest common monomial factor is the largest factor that each number has in common. Now, you learned about greatest common factors in 6th grade, okay, and probably before that, probably 4th or 5th grade. And you guys are always saying to me, Miss Craig, or some of you have said, and some of your parents are saying, why is that divisibility rule sign up on your classroom wall? Because we're in algebra. Well, it's there because I want you thinking about those rules because they're going to come in really handy now. So what I'm going to do to find my greatest common monomial factor, some of you might have it already in your head, is I'm going to take my factors of 56, and I'm just going to write them as pairs. So 1 and 56, 2 and 28. I should double check that one. I'm quite sure that's what it is. Okay. 3 does not go into 56. 4 goes in 14 times. 5 does not go into 56 evenly. 6 does not go into 56 evenly. And 7 goes in 8 times. So they are all my numeric factors. 14 is a little simpler. It's 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. 3 doesn't go in evenly. 4 doesn't go in evenly. 5 doesn't go in evenly, 6 doesn't, and 7 doesn't. Okay, so here are my factors. So I want to look for the largest factor that they have in common. And so it looks like it's going to be 14. And 14 is the largest factor they have in common. So we say that greatest common factor is 14. Now notice that each of them have an x. So that's going to be part of their common factors. But the 56 only has one x, so we're looking at the lowest power. So we want the lowest power of any common variable. Okay, and in this case, it just happens to be x. And so my GCF, or greatest common monomial factor, is 14x. Okay, let's look at another example. This time it's kind of the same thing, except for I wrote it as an expression. So I want to look what each of them have. Hopefully you all can see that each of these numbers is divisible by 2, and that it's your greatest common factor. It's the only thing that divides all three of them, actually, is the 2. Okay, then all three of them have an a, and my lowest power of my a is 1, and all three of them have a b, where the lowest power of that is a 1. So that's my common factor. Now we're going to use this to do what we call factor. And here's some steps for factoring using this, but what I want you to understand is all factoring is, when we're talking about algebraic expressions, is division. Except we're not starting out with, hey, I can divide by this, or what is this divided by this? What we're doing is we're finding two different factors, or two things that we can multiply together, much like we did when I asked you to find all the factors of 40 and 100, and I think it was 120. So what I want to do is I want to look at this. I want to find my greatest common factor between the 2, the 10, and the 6. It's just going to be 2. Okay, and each of them has the x with the lowest power being 1. So that's my greatest common factor. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my polynomial and I'm going to divide each term by 2x using all the rules that we learned in the last chapter. So I'm going to take my 2x and it's going to come out in front. And 2x to the 4th divided by 2x, the 2's cancel. Remember, we subtract the exponents, so we get x cubed. And we shouldn't be getting negative exponents here. Okay, 10x squared divided by 2x, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. And lastly, negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and then the x's cancel. So here is my final answer. So that's factored. I've found two factors that when I multiply them together should get me what I have. And if you wanted to double check, we could just multiply, right? So if I wanted to check, I would take my 2x and my two factors, because each of these are called a factor. So factors are 2x and x cubed plus 5x minus 3. So if I distribute, I'm going to get 2x to the 4th, 10x squared, and last one, 6x. So I got exactly what I started with, so I know that I factored correctly. Okay. So that's really all there is to that. So let's look at another example. This time I've got 4 terms, and hopefully you guys can see that the greatest common factor is 4. If not, you need to talk to me, but think about it. 4, the factors of 4 are 1, 2, and 4. The factors of 8 are going to be 1, 8, 2, and 4. The factors of 12 are 1, 12, 2, 6, 3, and 4. And then of 16, they're 1, 16, 2, 8, and then 4. So my greatest common factor that they have in common is 4. So my greatest common factor is 4. Now, this first term has an x, this term has an x, this term has an x, but the 16 doesn't. So x is not part of our greatest common factor. So our greatest common factor is just 4, and we're going to divide everything by that, pull it out in front. 4 divided by 4, now our variables are going to stay the same. 4 divided by 4 is 1, so I get x cubed minus 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. We're going to keep the variables. And 16 divided by 4 is 4. If you wanted to check, you could check. Okay. But if you don't, you can just go ahead and multiply. Or you can just trust yourself, and that's my final product. 4 is a factor of this polynomial. X cubed minus 2x squared plus 3x plus 4 is also a factor of this polynomial. Another example. I'm just going to keep on pounding you with examples so that you can hopefully get this. The greatest common factor between 21 and 35 is going to be 7. Okay, 21 is 7 times 3, 35 7 times 5, and that's all they're going to have in common. Okay, besides 1. Looks like all 3 of them have a y, so I've got a y, and a y. And my smallest power of y is y to the 5th. And then I've got an x squared and x, but the last one doesn't have a y, so x is not part of the greatest common factor. So I'm going to divide every term by 7y to the 5th. Okay, and when I do that, I'm going to get 21 divided by 7, so I'm going to bring the 7y to the 5th out. 21 divided by 7 is 3. 6 minus 5 is 1, so 3y. 75 divided by 7 is 5. The y to the 5s cancel out, and I'm just left with an x. And then 21 divided by 7 again is 3, and the y to the 5ths cancel out again. So here is my final answer. Okay. Got another example for you. I think it's the last. All right, so you might not see 48, 36, and 18. So I'm just going to come over here and write out my factors of 48, 1 and 48, 2 and 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, 5 doesn't go in, and then 6 and 8 are my other 2 factors. Didn't save room for them. 36, 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and then 6. Okay. And lastly, 18, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, and that's it. So it looks like my largest factor is going to be 6 that they have in common. Okay. So its greatest common factor is going to be 6. Everything has an A, and the smallest power of the A is 1, so we're just going to leave it A. Each term has a C, with the smallest power of the C being 1. And the first term has a B, but the second one doesn't, so that's not part of my greatest common factor. So I'm going to divide everything by 6AC, pull it out in front, and I'm going to get 48 divided by 6 is 8. A divided by A cancels, C divided by C cancels, and B squared. Okay. 36 divided by 6 is 6. A squared divided by A is just A to the 1st. C cubed divided by C is C squared. Then lastly, 18 divided by 6 is 3. A cubed divided by A is A squared. C divided by C cancels, and B divided by 1 is just B. So there's my final answer. Now, if you miss a common factor, always take a look and see if there's something else that can be divided by. And here we can't. 8, 6, 3 have no factors in common. Only the last 2 have an A. Only the first and the second one have an A, and only the middle one has a C. So we've got it. Remember that you can check by multiplication because factors is just division, and to undo division we multiply. So hopefully today you learned what a greatest common monomial factor is and how to factor it using the greatest common factor. Okay. I hope you guys, this is our last live lesson before spring break, so I hope you guys have a great spring break.